Welcome to the Everyday Saint podcast. Today we have Jonathan, which I'm so excited for you to come on and talk with us today. I've kind of gotten to know you actually since freshman year, just because you'd have lunch with our group, and little did I know that I'd be living with your fiance a couple years later. So I'm really excited for you to come on and just share about what God's done in your life. So welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited that I was asked. But I'm excited to have a good talk.
Yeah, awesome. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your faith journey?
Sure. Every time people ask me that, I usually have a pretty simplified version of, I grew up Catholic, my mom was Catholic, and my dad was raised Southern Baptist. And so when he was going through RCIA, basically the same time he was learning the Apostles' Creed, I was learning it because I went to private Catholic school. So we actually learned a few of our prayers together, which was nice. And then, so we grew up going to Mass and stuff, and private Catholic school was from kindergarten to 8th grade, so I stayed in till that. But then in 2nd grade, my mom got, before she had breast cancer, and we thought it had gone away, and then it came back, and she ended up passing away because of it. And so I was, I think, about 9 when she passed away. And my family just kind of stopped going to church because she was kind of the one to get everybody to go. So obviously, I was baptized and I had received First Communion and First Confession and all that. So I just stopped going, and the only days I would go were every week on Wednesday just because school, because they would make us go, which was really good, I think back on it. But we all just stopped going on Sundays, and then, we all just kind of fell away from the faith and church especially. And then in high school, freshman and beginning of sophomore year, I was the same. And then I just totally stopped going to church because I went to a public high school. And then the latter half of sophomore year, I met Elise, and she basically told me I'm not going to date somebody who isn't Catholic. And in my head, I'm like, well, I'm baptized, so I'm Catholic. I'm just not practicing, right? So she actually she got me to go to church with her again, and she would actually have to go to 2 masses every Sunday because her parents weren't super thrilled about me. So she would go earlier in the morning with her parents, and then she'd stay there and I'd meet her, and then we'd go to mass again together. So she, for some reason, sacrificed a lot for me right away, which, I don't know if anyone else would have ever done that. And then basically when I graduated high school, I wasn't super strong in the faith because I basically started going to church for a girl, which is how a lot of guys get roped into it. It's always a girl. But then once I came here to Benedictine, it was really nice because everybody here is, just the whole campus is just faith-based, which is great. And then living in Newman, they have a chapel underneath, so I would go there with my roommate. And then my roommate, Logan, was brought up very Catholic, and he was very well catechized, so he knew a lot, and I learned a lot from him. And then, so I basically had him and Elise, my first all of college, and they both taught me a lot. And then I would say, and now I go to adoration pretty regularly. I go to confession at least once or twice a month, and go to mass every Sunday now. So
right, you're practicing. Not just
I'm officially practicing.
Officially got the stamp of approval. Especially if you're engaged to Elise now. She wasn't willing to even date someone who wasn't practicing. Must have improved a lot.
Yeah, it was weird. It was definitely a switch that flipped in my head. I'm truly, it was it sounds cheesy and cliche, but there's something about her. I'm it's just worth whatever it is that is being asked. So
that's so sweet.
Yeah, and then my family now. My sister isn't religious at all anymore, and then my dad actually started going to mass again because my stepmom's mom, so my step grandma, I guess, she moved in with us, and she's a very devout Catholic, but she's can't drive anymore. So she got them to go to mass with her. So now they go every Sunday.
There you go.
Which, that was really nice to hear. and they started going to mass again. So yeah, they've been going to mass for last like 2.5 years, maybe 2.5, maybe 3 years. But yeah, they still are very, they're not in a place like Benedictine where they're taking theology classes and
Right.
philosophy, so they're not super like concrete on their faith, and they still have a ton of questions, and a lot of the answers I give them they don't like because
Sure.
that's kind of the struggle with the faith is you want to be able to do what you want because that's what society tells you should do, and then the church says like no, there are moral rules, and it's hard to, especially when you're in your 50s, and you've lived your life without those rules, and all of a sudden you like what you're doing by going to church, but then they say you have to do this, and it's just hard, I think, for them to adopt those.
Oh, for sure, yeah, because it's like their lifestyle, and then it's reconciling like, oh, but I like haven't made this decision,
Mm-hmm.
but is my life fine still? Like it depends on that, what definition of like how you want to live your life. I'm curious though, knowing that your faith kind of started out from a girl, and like
Right, yeah.
and like hearing that and really pursuing the girl, and the faith was an aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
When did like you kind of notice that you started to make these faith-based decisions on your own?
Yeah, that was probably into college. Yeah, because in high school, I don't really think I give any credit to myself. Yeah, because by that time I was still not doing like everything for her, but yeah, when I started out, I'm like, okay, I'm doing it, because she wants me to, so I'll do it. But yeah, definitely in college, and I think the most like noticeable change in my faith was kind of the transition from sophomore year to junior year of college. So like pretty recently, and it's not like freshman and sophomore year of college. I still did things like on my own now because you're in college and it's a lot different than. I guess I did follow my girlfriend in college, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I think definitely like when I think about it, I don't know, like there's not like a day, I'm like I changed my mind, so I do everything just for me or for God, and but yeah, I think sophomore to junior year was when I had a really big kind of, I just started like understanding more, I think is kind of how I can put it, and it's not that like I learned like something revolutionary in like a class, and all the classes I did take were great, all the professors here are wonderful, but I think just on my own I just started actually like praying more, and just trying to fully understand like what it was that I had to do instead of like what I have to do for Elise now, and it was more what can I do for God instead of, because before it's kind of like practicing in a selfish way, and just the fact that I wanted to do it for someone else and not for God, or because I wanted something out of it. Yeah, I think so. Definitely, pretty recently, I think is when I have grown the most. Yeah, I think sophomore to junior year was kind of where I noticed the change.
Right, and it's beautiful. This is a story of like God will take what He can get and like transform it into something that's really incredible, and an amazing story of like learning how to love Him better, and like what that even looks like in your own life. Like He's going to take that little seed of faith and help it turn into something that like now like you feel much more confident living your life for God, and not just for God because I could get something from it. Like it's a genuine reaction, and I'm curious and kind of that growth, if there was anything enticing about the faith that drew you in more.
That's a good question. So the way that I think a lot of things started to change is, let me just start off with saying that I think God gives signs to people who really need them and who are dumb enough with faith. It's kind of how I think about it, because I think I'm extremely lucky, and that like I've gotten so many signs that are so like concrete, and that I realized like I needed them because I couldn't figure it out otherwise. Because someone like Elise, she knows everything. Like it's like I learned something in theology class, and I'm like so excited to go tell her. She's like, oh yeah, and then she'll like bring up like the council that the church made that decision. I'm like, who learns this? I'm like, how do you know this already? But she's always said like, oh, she's never gotten like any signs. And like I tell her all these things that happen to me. She's like, she's like, nothing like that ever happens to me. And I think it's because she's already so rooted in her faith, and God is, I mean, she wouldn't be like dependent on those things like I was at a certain point. And because she's already like so rooted. And so that's why I think of it as, God gives these signs to people because they really need them to like understand something or help them get through something. But I think that, what was kind of like enticing to me in the faith, or like what helped me understood, is I remember like the first time I ever got, like I like truly asked for a sign. I was in the graveyard at my mom, her tombstone, and I'll just go there and talk to her. And that was, I'm trying to remember, I think I might have still been in high school. I think it was maybe like senior year of high school during like COVID when we didn't have school. I mean, we had school, but really we didn't. Yeah. But I remember going there, and I remember praying about something. I think, I don't know, maybe, like, I don't know what I was going through, but all I remember is I was just sitting there and like, like if I know it's so silly, because that's what you do as a kid all the time. You're like, I want a sign. You're like, I want to see Mary. Like, I want to see an angel, my guardian angel. I want to see a saint. I want to see God. But that you just do that because you're like superficial about it. You're like, I want to tell people that I saw this, right? And not like, oh, I need it now. It's more like, I just want to, because then all the kids at school would be like, oh yeah, no, like so cool. So I was at her tombstone. I was just sitting there, I guess, kind of praying, because I don't know. It's not like you make the sign of the cross, but you sit there and you're just like, like you start talking, kind of like to yourself, but to them, and I guess it's kind of prayer eventually. But I was sitting there, I was like, I just really need like a sign. Like, and it was just a sign of like, I'm like, I'll just take anything, I'm like, just give me a sign. And like I don't even remember what it was for, but I'm sure I was going through something, right? But I remember right after that, I would, I was like, okay, like said bye to my mom. I got back in my car. I turned the radio on, and the song that starts playing is "I Saw the Signs" by Ace of Base, which is ironic, I think, because it's so, that's just ironic. A song called "I Saw the Signs," and it opened up my eyes, that's how the lyrics go. But, and the only other time I've heard that song on the radio is when I finished, me and Elise have like a constant novena. We pray to Saint Cecilia, who's the patroness of music. And so, because both of us love music, and that's like kind of the biggest thing in both of our lives. And the only other time was, again, I was just having a hard time, and it was the 9th day of the novena, and so we had just said it together, and I was hanging out with her, and I like said goodnight to her because it was late. I think I was staying at one of my friend's house over like Christmas break during college. I remember I think we prayed the last day of the novena together, and then I got in my car and I was sitting there and I was just like, I might have been a little upset about something, and in my head I'm like, when you finish a novena, I'm like, aren't you supposed to like get like a sign from the saint or something? And I was just being kind of like, not like, I guess like arrogant, just kind of being like, I think I was just like a little upset about something, and I might have just been getting like aggravated, but I was like, like, what? Like, you're supposed to get a sign again? And then like as soon as I thought that, again, I Saw the Signs by Ace of Base came on the radio. And those are the only 2 times that I've ever heard it. Actually, those are the main 2 times I heard them on the radio. The 3rd time I heard that song on the radio was, I think it was All Saints Day or Ash Wednesday in the Abbey. It was one of those times. And I remember, I think it was Ash Wednesday. And I remember like, I sat back in like the choir lofts, behind the altar. It's really nice back there. I love it because like you're facing the other people, which is kind of funny, and then you're right next to the choir. They sound great. But I remember sitting there thinking about something, and a lot of times like I have like questions about like the faith, not like questioning it, but like I have these like thoughts where I'm like, oh, like, well, would God want it to be like thought of this way or like this way? I remember just like I was just driving in the car, I think with Reagan and James or something, because I drove them there, and I remember being in the car just like thinking about, like they were talking, I was just thinking to myself, And like as I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I think it's supposed to be like this way. And then Ace of Base again came on the radio. I'm like, oh, okay. It's just like one of the things where it's like I only ever heard it whenever I have like a very like spiritual moment or like questions in my life, and every time I hear it, it's like I know everything is like good.
Yeah.
So, it's a really long answer to what entices me about the faith, but yeah, I think once I started, like the first time I got that sign, I'm like, there's no way that that's like coincidental. Mm-hmm. And that was in high school when I wasn't like super like concrete yet, but I heard that, and I was like, I'm like, there's no way, I'm like that has to be like God trying to tell me something. So yeah, I'm, like I said, I would call myself dumb in the faith because I need so many like very obvious things to happen to me that I'm like, wow, that was so great that happens. But I'm like, obviously I needed it or else I wouldn't have understood, what God was trying to lead me to. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, God's a pursuer. Like, he sees your strive and he wants to bring you to an even stronger faith. Like, he wants to bring all of us to the strongest faith possible and bring us to sainthood and lead us to heaven. And as a pursuer, like, his love is very endearing. And I think that's so sweet that he's just, like, made the song, like, it's a song that you and God have. Like, we have that with humans. Like, a song comes on and you think of, like,
oh, that's our song.
A certain person. Yeah, and then it's like, oh, this is, like, your song with God. And we all kind of have those little, like, cheeky moments where it's like, this is just my thing with God. And one of those, like any sort of love, you really can't describe it. Like, you can come on here and talk about Elise, and even if I see you guys interact, like, my perspective on your love for each other is like completely different than what you know of your love from each other, because you're in this relationship. And I think it's kind of the same thing with God. It's like, no matter the words that we use to describe, like, you'll never be able to truly describe like those feelings and those little intimacies that you have with God. That it's like it's just you two.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that you want to be able to tell people like how it made you feel and like how that like it was so concrete. But when you try to explain it, you're like, I can't. But it's like, I know that for me, it's like it matches like exactly what you're thinking and exactly what you're feeling, and like it's just one of the things where it's like like it's indisputable. You're like, yes, that was meant for me and like not for anyone else. So yeah, that's one of my favorite things from the Bible is, God saying like God is a jealous God, like he wants you for himself, he's like, he doesn't want you to devote yourself to anyone else except him. I think that's one of the best things, because you're like, he so obviously loves all of us more than anything, like he loves us more than himself because he gave himself for us. And then hearing that like he's a jealous God, like wasn't like jealousy like kind of bad, but then you realize it's like because he loves us, like he created us so that we could reciprocate love to each other, and then he gave us partners so that we could reciprocate love between ourselves and people who are like us. And then he saw that, and then obviously he knows all this already, but then he made himself human so that he could reciprocate his love in the most human way possible. And it's great.
Yeah, no, that was also like, I'm like just taking all of that in, because I guess I've never even thought about that part of it. I'm reading through the Psalms right now, and it's a lot of like, they're talking about like vengeance and justice, but then also like the mercy. And part of me was like, man, what kind of stuff did they have between each other that they were so like vengeful of one another and always looking to like get revenge? And like, they're so like, it's just silly human things. And I think sometimes it's like, they're like, you despise the wicked and cast them into like, and like it goes off on this whole thing. I'm like, man, you must have really had something against this person. But even kind of comparing that to what you were just saying, like, okay, well, like, there's qualities in God that, like, we have to really think about what that means for us, and, like, God making all of these things good, and there's so much that we can learn about these qualities from God. Like, like, who is God? Like, that's the biggest question, and I think how we answer those questions is through Scripture, but also through these moments that we have with Him. Like, who God is to me is completely different than who God is to you, but we still serve, like, this God who loves us, like, intimately and profoundly.
Yeah. I think, yeah, for me is, like you try to, I think one of the great mysteries of the faith is, why does God love us? And that's something that you can't understand, because you have to understand, because God is love, and like you can't fully understand God because it's impossible, like you don't know everything, but it's just one of the things is like he loves us, and well, I guess you can kind of understand it, because love is willing to give for someone for the sole purpose of their own good. And so I guess you look at God, and God is love, and he just wills the good of us for its own sake and not for his own sake. And I guess you can understand God as that, like God really is love. And I think God, to all of us is the same, because he is love. And I think it's what we all have to figure out is how God is calling us to love him, because I think that's different for everyone. Because I think everyone has, it's kind of like a love language. It's like everyone has like different love languages.
Yeah.
And I think God understands that, because we're all completely unique in our own ways, and that the way that we show love as like a true sacrifice of ourselves is all different, because we all value different things, and I guess if you boil it down, it's like, yeah, we all value ourselves, and we have to give ourselves for him, and that's kind of the essence of it. But I think a big part of everybody's faith is trying to understand how God wants us to serve him and to love him, and basically just trying to figure out like the love language of God. That doesn't sound ridiculous, but
No, I think that's really interesting to think of, and thinking of like, what is love? Well, God gives himself to us, and then we're meant to like love God in return and will the good of like everything that we have and give it to him. Which it's funny to think of, because it's like, what can we give to God? Like, what can we give to God that he doesn't already have? There's nothing, except for like, all we can give to God is ourselves, which actually was like created by him himself. So it's like this like circular like motion of giving, of like God gives us this love, gives us this life, and we're meant to like give it back to him as a gift. But it's like, that's crazy to I really like boil it down and think of. And wow.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think a way that makes it easy for me to understand, whenever I'm in prayer or something and I'm trying to think about that, I'm like, because God is asking absolutely everything from you. And I think to make it easier to kind of give some of it up is by thinking, well, if God created me, he's already given me, like everything I have is his already. Like I'm just giving it back to him. And through personal experience and through scripture, that whatever you give back, he's going to give back to you, like tenfold. And whether that be like spiritually or physically, like whatever opportunities you have been granted in life, like God gives those to you. And then obviously, for eternity, whatever you give up now, he's going to give to you, 100-fold, whenever you die. Like
Right.
He doesn't forget, and he knows like how much every little thing means to you when you give it up. And so that's just a way that I think it's easier to help kind of comprehend what's being asked of us, is just remembering that everything that's given to us already is from God. And so everything we give up for him already belongs to him, and we shouldn't really think of it as our own belongings. We should think of it as just giving back to God what he is owed.
Yeah. Wow. Shoot, I had a thought and then I lost it. But I'm curious now, kind of, like, how do you feel like God has been working in your life recently?
Oh man. I think recently I've tried to go into adoration more, and I think adoration is like fantastic. Obviously, I mean, you're literally in front of God. I mean, there's no better place on earth to be, and yet we only go there for 30 minutes or an hour, and we're like, okay, like that was good. I got my fill. I'm gonna go back home and watch TV now. It's like, it's so ridiculous when you think about like what, like the truth of it, right? But we're human. We're all fallen. But in adoration, I think like every time I was reading some saint for, might have been Christian Marriage, or I might have just been reading it on my own, and I wish I could remember what saint it was, but they were, might have been Sister Miriam again from Hollow, but I think she was saying like adoration, like you go there because you trust in God to give you what you're asking of Him when you go to like just be with Him. But because whenever I go to adoration, I mean, truly it's just like all that there is peace, and like there are no worries when I'm in adoration. It's just like you're there, and God's 10 feet in front of you, and you just sit there and you pray and you just entrust your life to Him. And obviously always we pray that we would entrust ourselves to God, but it's just very helpful to go in person and just kind of like remind yourself, because he obviously remembers, but it's us that have the issue of remembering what we actually promised and keeping our promises. But yeah, so in adoration, I just praying there, I think, has really given me a lot of understanding for what I should be offering to God and what areas of my life I should be more conscious about, and just how I conduct myself, and how, especially like certain people that I think I need to be truly like good around and willed or good, and not hold grudges, or just obviously trying to avoid all sin, but especially you live with people for years, it's like you get aggravated, but also you're like, I love them, they're my best friends, and so living with people, with relationships, just entrusting that everything is going to work out, because I think here we're especially very fortunate because we have the understanding of being told almost every day by theology professors that love is sacrifice. And I feel like whenever Elise and I are, like have like a little bit of an argument, I mean, recently I think we've both really just trusted each other and had faith in each other, but also really have just given faith to God and like trusted in Him, because every time I just remind myself that love is sacrifice. And so then it's like, especially for like that next week, I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna do everything that I can to be selfless and like to give everything that I can to her, and then it always turns out amazing, and it's like our relationship has been the best that it's been for the last 2 years, like it's just been like a honeymoon phase, for 2 years, and I just think it's great because all of it's because of God, like that's not because of me or her. I mean, maybe her. I think she's a born saint. Like, she's truly, like one of the most virtuous people I know. But just trusting in God and giving everything that you have to Him always pays itself back. So,
Right, which is hard because it's like you're giving like the selfless and sacrificial love and like getting nothing in return, and sometimes it's even difficult for us to pinpoint the ways that we can be more selfless, even like when it's like holding the door open for someone, but that requires you like standing there for an extra couple seconds, and it's like kind of awkward, but like then you're being more virtuous by holding the door open for that person who needs it, or saying hi to someone that maybe you have a little bit of resentment or animosity towards, but you're still going to choose to show a little bit of kindness to them. And like those little moments, like when we're obedient in those little moments of sacrificial love, or like you and Elise see each other pretty often. I mean, maybe not right now because I know she's not living in Atchison, but even then it's like when you live with people or are around people a lot, it's harder to be more sacrificial for them because you fall into the routine of like, I love this person and I trust that I love this person, but there's still a requirement of the more I can give of this person, like the more that I am choosing to love them and show God's love through that love, because like any act of selfless love is like a gift from God and a gift from God through you to that person.
Yeah, my big thing in adoration is when I pray, I'm like, like any good that I do, God, I know it's not because of me. Like it's only through you that I'm able to do any good. And I think keeping that in mind is really important for people, because I think it's very easy to feel self-righteous and be like, wow, like I'm I'm like a modern day saint, you know? It's like, I'm like just doing so good. It's like, I'm doing all this stuff. But then like you get like that, and then like, you start feeling above people, even if like you try to lower yourself for their own good. But thinking that you do good and that it's not God working through you is just ridiculous. Because like we don't have the capability to be purely good, because God is good, and we can't do anything without the source of good working through us. But yeah, like you were saying, like, you know, holding a door open for somebody and just feeling awkward for a little bit, you know, it's to you, and I think especially in like college and school, it's like magnified, the like awkwardness, because all this, like, you know, everybody here,
right,
and you know kind of like the social awareness everyone has, and you're like, I might look a little bit silly doing this, but you're like I know if a person holds a door open for me, like, I appreciate it, you know, and you're like, oh, like, thanks, and even if it's just like half a second, you're like, oh, thank you, you know, whatever. But I think almost a good rule of thumb is, like, if you think about doing something and you're like, that would be good for that person, but I'd feel awkward or look like silly, or I'd look just like, you know, the image of myself would deteriorate. It's like, you should probably do it, right? Because like that's what love is, right? Is you're sacrificing whatever you can give in that moment. You know, like if you're doing something for someone, but it doesn't require a sacrifice, is that really love? You know, or is that just because you're so fortunate to be able to do it that you just have like excess? But that's, I think, a big part is doing things for others when you don't have the necessities for yourself to do it, and just willing to lower yourself for the sake of others.
Right, yeah, doing it, just because you can, even if it, like, I mean, that awkwardness, I think you can offer up, and maybe those couple extra seconds that you're waiting there is like a little prayer to God or something, and just like praying for that person that you're holding the door open for, or even doing things for people who aren't going to be grateful for what you're doing for them. I think that's like almost even more difficult sometimes, because it's like, well, I can do this, and they're like not even going to appreciate it, or like I don't like, they're not even going to notice that I did this, and like that's a warped way of viewing that act of love, because that should be freely given. Like, God does so much for us that we don't even recognize, that we don't even thank Him for, or we forget to thank Him for. Like, how terrible of us is that God does so much during our day, and it's like, even something I've been praying about in the morning, like, thank you already for the things that I'm not even going to notice that you do today, because in our humanity we just like skim over the little blessings of our day, and like those moments where we're offering those sacrificial love, like those are little blessings for that person too. Even if like we never even have any idea like what that means, or what that does for that person's day.
And it's one of those things where, you know, you doing something for someone could mean absolutely nothing to them, or it could mean the world, and you have no idea, you know, because on the outside they're going to appear the same, but you, like, on the inside, you know, you could have made their day by doing something completely random. Well, not random, but something that you thought would be good for them. And it's just important to not think about it in the way of like, oh, maybe they won't even notice, like, oh, they're not even going to appreciate it. It's like, just do it. You do it for their own sake. It's like not for yours or what you get back from it, you know. But
yeah, and something I was thinking about too that I think kind of coincides with what we were saying earlier is like, yes, we can never like describe the love that we have for God, and the love that God has for us, and like describe accurately like the depths of that love. But I think we can show, like, I can't describe it to you, but let me show you it in the way that I act and the things that I do, and that's evidence of God's love.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, in the Bible, you know, they say faith without action isn't faith at all. And it's just all about you actually doing something instead of just sitting around praying about doing something.
Yeah. Well, this about brings us to our time. Is there anything else that you would like to leave